Welcome back to the Billtendo show with myself and my partner Mike. I'm Billtendo. I love playing video games. I love spreading video games. If you're looking for video games, always check me out on Billtendo.com. I got you covered.
And I'm Mike. I am not Billtendo. I do like video games, but I'm not him. I'm more grounded. I have more common sense and a life outside of video games. And I'm just here to support Billy and make sure that he doesn't go off the video game deep end at some point and Scrooge McDuck into a pile of DS games. And this is the Billtendo show.
So
this is where we are every week. And each week here in this magical wonderland of Billy stuff, we talk about a variety of things that interest us in the worlds of pop culture, video games, TV, movies, mostly from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, because that's what we like. And you're going to listen to stuff that we like to talk about because you like to be here. Billy, talk about yourself.
What do you want me to talk about? Me, man. I'm just a guy. I don't know, man. I just love video games. But it's funny you said the thing about the Scrooge McDuck into a pile of DS games, because I bought a kind of a bundle from somebody, and there was a ton of unidentified DS games. And I bought a 500 game lot from someone, and I mean, there's a gallon Ziploc bag full of DS games, and I'm like, holy moly, it's going to take me a year to sell all of these. So,
I like DS, Billy. You can always get back to me on those at some point.
Yeah, I like DS also, but only to an extent, man. If I'm playing DS, to be perfectly honest, when I break out the DS, number one, I use the old original Chunky Boy model because I like it. I like the way it feels. I don't use a DS Lite too often. And I like to use it to play my Game Boy Advance games. So.
I like mine as well. I have the Lite. I have a pink one because I have a thing with pink and purple handhelds. So when I was an adolescent in my teens and 20s, we had friends that played too. And the easiest way to not get your DS or your Game Boy Color or whatever mixed up with your friends' ones was to have a really flamboyant color. So that's always kind of been my thing. So I've always gone that direction. But I have an R4 chip modded DS, and I like playing Castlevania. I like Advance Wars.
Right.
I like simple stuff.
Yeah, no, that's when it comes to DS. Whoops. When it comes to DS, I like to play puzzle games. I remember when I first got my DS, I had one of the launch models, and then my daughter's birthday comes around maybe 6 months or so after the launch of the DS is when they launched the DS Lite. And it really wasn't that long. It maybe a year, but it was in a very small time frame. I remember thinking that. And at the time, DS Lite was only available in white. And so it came out like 4 days before my daughter's birthday. I bought her the DS Lite, and we spent so many hours in the living room playing like Big Brain Academy and Brain Age and stuff like that. You know, the Mario games were fun and all of that, but for us, it was like puzzle games that we could play together and compete against each other.
Oh yeah, I totally remember buying mine and having Brain Age, and I played with my girlfriend at the time to see who could be, have the youngest Brain Age. That was lots of fun. I had a good time with that. Clubhouse games too. Had a lot of fun with that, playing with a couple DSs, playing right next to each other.
Yeah, absolutely. DS was a great handheld system.
And the coolest part about the DS, Billy, is that the games are minus, maybe the top 10%, because they're all really cheap. That is the topic of today's show, is what Billy likes to call ballers on a budget.
That's
Later on in the show today, we're going to talk about some cheap games. And I bet you there'll be some DS in there. I
actually have DS games on my list. I wasn't even going to bring up DS, early on, but I actually have some DS games in my list. So
I
um,
do too.
I don't know. Here's a funny thing is I got the original Model DS and I really just used it to play games with my daughters and my sons at the time. But I would say 90% of my handheld at the time was the PSP. I was all over PSP. Um, I know a lot of people were disappointed with Death Jr., but Death Jr. will forever be an iconic game to me. I don't know if you've ever got to play it or not.
I have not.
Well, Sony really pumped it up before the release of the PSP and the game. They were really pumping it up like this is their killer game for the platform, and this is gonna really smash Nintendo. And it was a fun little platformer, but it was kind of janky, and it had a cool aesthetic to it, almost Tim Burton-esque. So it was a cool thing to look at. It was a cool thing to play, but it was no Mario killer. Everybody's looking for that Mario killer, and it hasn't happened. It's never going to happen.
That's probably true. All right. Well, speaking of older games and things that are killing Mario, the first news story on our nerd news tonight is that Microsoft is going to lock down the emulation on the Xbox Series X and Series S. So there won't be as much of that outside of if you use developer mode. So the cool thing about the new Series systems was that the S especially was like an emulation like King box. It was
Right.
awesome. And that for like what 3 years now or so, 2-3 years, like people could just install emulation software on the newer Xbox. Well, it's just sitting in retail mode, like the mode that you would pick it up off the shelf and use like an average consumer. But now Microsoft is blocking all of that stuff, so you have to pay for the developers mode, which I don't remember what it's like by the month you have to pay for. I don't think you can get a yearly subscription to it. So now all the emulation stuff is unable to launch in retail mode. You got to hide behind developers mode to get all that stuff to work. I'm sure people will still use it, but that was one of the reasons that a lot of people really like the Xbox over the PlayStation for this generation.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say that's a major reason. I'll also just lightly graze over availability. The PS5 might have been desirable, but I think a lot of that had to do with they didn't make enough of them. But as far as the emulation goes, yeah, everyone I know that has a Series X has RetroArch installed on it, and they're playing all their own games. And me myself, I sell physical games and I sell emulation machines. Personally, I like to build mine out of the Wii. I think it's a great base. But the thing is, like, if you have a new Series X, you can do this by downloading RetroArch, which has emulators for everything. And I did read that about Microsoft shutting it down. I don't know, man. I think if I was playing on a Series X and I was playing all my games through emulation on Series X along with my new games on the Series X, I would probably pay the $20 a month or whatever it is for the developer mode, depending on the price. If it's $100 a month, no. But if it's $25 a month, I would pay that. I'd pay that.
I think you're probably not in the minority on that. Anybody who's already doing it is probably going to continue doing it. But if people were going to buy something specifically for emulation, then they're probably now going to shy away from that. So you might actually see some slowdown on the Series S, the digital Xbox, specifically because that's why people were buying them off the shelves and rebuying them, secondhand.
Right. I think there's a big thing with emulation. We have so many games, and maybe we should talk about this one day. I think it'd make a great subject for us. System locked games that are locked to a certain system and they'll never be remastered or reproduced for newer systems. And there's so many games like that. And it seems like a company like Nintendo has little to no interest in doing fan service to us older people. They're going to keep producing new things, and we get little drips and drabs of remasters or ports. But at the end of the day, the majority of the Nintendo games we want to play are not available unless you buy a used physical copy.
Yeah, I mean, it does blow a little bit, but I'm also a physical collector, so I understand stuff's going to fall apart over time, and that yeah, I'm probably going to have to find other ways to do it. But we could have a solar flare from the sun and suffer an enormous electromagnetical storm, and we could lose all the world's servers and everything that's backed up on everybody's computers, get it fried, and then emulation isn't going to do you any good either. So, I don't like to think about tomorrow, just today.
That's right. You say I don't want to think about tomorrow, just today, and then you're like, I only have 12 games left to complete the Japanese Nintendo 64 run.
Yeah, but even if the carts don't work and all my systems are fried, at least I can look at them then.
Yeah, pretty plastic.
Speaking of things to look at, story 2 tonight is we're going to have 3 new Star Wars movies to look at on the way.
What?
Yep, 3 new the trio of films from James Mangold, Dave Filoni, and Charmin O.C. And Daisy Ridley is going to make a return in these. So they've already put the groundwork down. New trios coming. They said that there's no titles or premiere dates so far, but Kennedy shared that Mangold's film will go back to the Dawn of the Jedi, while Filoni's film, which will focus on the New Republic, and then they're going to try to connect directly into the streaming one. So The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, the Ashoka things, and all that stuff that's out right now. So the new films are going to try to tie in all the stuff that we've been consuming for the last 2 years.
Right. Okay. So that film I can get on board with to an extent. I can also get on board with Dawn of the Jedi, as long as they don't just try to make a new trilogy. The last one was terrible, man. And I remember watching it and leaving the theater, especially the last one. The first one of the new trilogy, after I saw it, I told my wife when we left the theater, I'm like, that was just a rehash of A New Hope. I didn't feel like they really gave us anything other than potential. And I'm like, that's okay. Maybe the next one will be better. And the second one was okay. And the third one was just absolute garbage. I hated everything about it. It was candy. You know what I mean? Like it was just eye candy. It all looked good, but it had no substance. You were still hungry afterwards. So now I'm hesitant because I love Star Wars. I really do. But I'm hesitant because of what they did with that trilogy.
I'm gonna go see it. I took my oldest to all the new ones, yeah. And like I agree with you. The first one, I think it was done on purpose, obviously, to make it like A New Hope, so then it would resonate with us. The second one was good. I actually liked the third one. I didn't love it, but I liked it. The throne room lightsaber battle was one of my favorite lightsaber battles in the whole new trilogy. I mean, I don't know. I didn't hate it. Maybe I'm living in nostalgia land. I'm not a huge Star Wars nerd. Like I like Star Wars, but it's not like my end all be all of science fiction theater. And so, but it was enough for me to enjoy it. So, but like I said, I am also not the aficionado. I just like to take my kids to movies. So.
Right. Yeah. So I can't believe you like that movie. Whatever, Mike. Our friendship is tenable at this point. But
it's been that way since the beginning, so it's.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. I think we do a pretty good job of tolerating each other. That's awesome.
It's the distance.
The last Star Wars movie was so bad that I said out loud in the theater, probably 30 seconds before Rey said it, and I am every Jedi. Like it was so like pedantic. I felt like everything was being foreshadowed like heavy-handed. We knew the next thing that was going to happen with everything. And worst of all was the Snoke transgression. So they had this great villain in the first two movies, and you're like, who is this? Who is this? And then in the third movie, they just walk past a cloning tank, and you're like, oh, and there's no story to it. Nothing. Like, he could have been a great villain with a great history. Instead, it's just like, hey, this guy's a clone in a tank. And that's it. They killed a good story for no reason.
Yeah. I thought it was nice to see Palpatine back. So, I mean, once again, I watched them for fans. I watched them because I wanted my kid to be, feel like I did, because I grew up when the second trilogy, the 1, 2, and 3, not 4, 5, and 6 were out. So pod racing and Clone Wars and like that came out when I was in my teens and my early 20s. So like it was nice to see new movies for me, and then my kid was the correct age to see new movies. So it's really hard to disappoint me, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, you grew up on the prequel trilogy, so yeah, you got a pretty high tolerance for disappointment, I guess.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. I remember the first time I ever saw Darth Vader, and it was actually Star Wars was on television. A New Hope was on television, and I was watching it in my living room, and I don't know. It's one of my core memories. You know how you have these random memories from like when you were in kindergarten or something? It's not a big memory, but I do remember standing in front of the TV in the living room. I was probably in kindergarten, and Darth Vader entered Leia's ship, and I was just like, this is the baddest man I've ever seen in my life. So
yeah, I've seen Inside Out. I know how core memories work, Billy.
oh,
it's a great movie. Inside Out. You never watched that? Did you say core memory without knowing where that term came from for this generation?
Oh, no. What, Mike, I'm older than this generation, man. I'm old.
You got to watch Inside Out, man. They do a whole thing about core memories, and it's just like bubblegum songs and tripping down the stairs in front of your friends. That's the best memories.
Yeah, that's true, man.
So speaking of memories, a game from my childhood is making a comeback in a couple days, 2 or 3 days, depending on when you're listening to this. Nintendo Switch is adding Pokemon Stadium on April 12th to the Nintendo Switch Online Plus library. The way that they haven't quite said exactly what they're going to do, because everybody's first question is, well, how are you going to transfer your Pokemon? You're probably not. That's not happening. We're not getting a transfer pack. But it says that they're going to be released on the N64 with a battle arena that has every Pokemon from Red, Blue, and Yellow, alongside a bevy of the solo and multiplayer modes that people liked from the original thing. There's mini games and stuff. They haven't said exactly how much of that is going to be available for multiplayer, but there'll be obviously friend battles with up to 4 players, because with Switch Online you can play 4 as opposed to sitting around and linking up Game Boys and stuff like that. Right. And there's also going to be some of the mini games, Sushi Go Round and Magikarp Splash, were the ones that they highlighted in the little preview video. So a couple days, Pokemon Stadium.
Okay, so quick question: is this going to be on the regular Nintendo Switch store, or is this going to be N64 expansion pass?
It's the expansion pass. It's just the next game they're adding.
Okay, so my next question for you is, do you think we're getting all of Stadium, or do you think that they are going to chop it in half and do a Stadium 1, Stadium 2?
They've already announced Stadium 2, so you're only getting Stadium 1 first.
Okay. That's
so they come separately.
Yeah, well, they were 2 complete games.
But what I haven't seen is, because you're such an aficionado of Japanese games, a lot of people like to have an account in, their home country, which if you're listening here, North America, United States, and then they like to have an alt account so they can play the Japanese version of the games or swap over and get the PAL, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know if people in Japan are getting Stadium 1 and 2, because the Stadium 1 was half of what Stadium 1 was here, and then their Stadium 2 was our Stadium 1, and so on and so forth. So I don't know if they're getting both or if they're just getting the second one there. I don't know yet.
And our Stadium 2 was their silver gold.
Yep.
So I've you know how many times I've had to explain this to people. And I'm sure you've explained it a million times also.
Yeah. I like to call their Stadium 1 is Stadium 0.5.
That's the same
Stadium
thing
1
I
half.
call it. It's 0.5. Because it's about, if you ever actually played, it's like a half a game.
Yeah. And it's only, outside of Pikachu, it's only fully, so you take every Pokemon and go to its complete evolution, and those were the ones that were available in the Japanese Stadium 1. And it was because it was meant to just be, it wasn't meant to have Pokemon. It was supposed to be for the Japanese tournament players on Game Boy to just upload their Pokemon and then play it on the big screen tournament style. But then they decided, well, we should probably put some game to this. So there's something for people who don't play the Game Boy games, because it's hard to release a Nintendo 64 game with no Nintendo 64 compatibility whatsoever, other than what it can do on the Game Boy. So they added all the Max Evolution Pokemons, and then it took off completely. Everybody loved the game, and so they had to actually finish it.
Right.
And that's why they got Stadium 2.
Yeah. If you ask me, and I know this is not the popular opinion, but it was popular enough it got a remaster. Snap was the definitive Pokemon game for Nintendo 64.
It's also the best first-person shooter on the Nintendo 64.
I mean, technically, you're not wrong.
I'm not wrong. It is the best it's my favorite first-person shooter, and I only like good things. So if I like it.
Oh, yeah, well, I like terrible things, Mike.
I know.
You know what I had for dinner? Mashed potatoes and baked macaroni.
Well, that's not so bad. I thought you were gonna say something like the Kraft spaghetti that comes in the green box that you get off the shelf, where you gotta add tomato paste.
No, but do you know what I eat that freaks my wife out?
Kraft spaghetti in the green box that comes off the shelf.
Oh. No. I grew up poor in the South, man, so you might not even know what this is. Some people do, some people don't. I eat potted meat. I keep six.
That's fine.
I keep 6 cans in the cabinet. I'm working at the house. I'll run upstairs and make something for lunch. I'll just make a couple potted meat sandwiches real quick. And my wife has, for years, she had never heard about it until we met. And a lot of people haven't. It's not, I guess it's kind of popular in certain regions, but she's like, that looks and smells like cat food.
Yes,
and so nobody in my house eats potted meat except for me, and I always keep a half dozen cans in there.
I like Spam. I as opposed to potted, but my dad was in the Navy, so when he was stationed in Hawaii, that's all. That was like a delicacy there. They didn't have pigs yet and stuff, so it's So Spam and eggs on Saturday morning, we had a lot. Spam, fried Spam sandwiches. Spam matsubi sometimes if we were fancy.
Yeah.
Which is just Spam with teriyaki sauce and rice for people who have never had it. There's a seaweed wrapper on it, but when you grow up in Wisconsin, like where I live, it's just Spam with teriyaki sauce and rice, like a sandwich.
So, Mike, I'm going to blow up a little bit of my personal history here, and I don't, it's something that I don't talk about very often, but before I was Billtendo, I actually had several meme accounts that were pretty big, and I did them under false names, but obviously, like IG names or whatever. And one time I told my wife, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make a potted meat meme, and I'm going to make potted meat memes a thing. And she's like, that's never going to happen. And within 4 days, people were like sending me memes. Other people were making like Twinkies filled with potted meat and all this stuff. I had potted meat memes on my page that were getting 200,000 likes. And she's like, I cannot believe that happened. You said you were going to make potted meat memes a thing. And I was like, well, yeah, but I also didn't really think people would relate to it. I think they would see it and be like, that's kind of ridiculous. I'll share that.
Love it. I mean, I also like to make memes about
Yes.
specific video games and things. So I feel you where you can really push the narrative of one thing by being really proficient
Oh,
and
yeah.
making stupid memes all day long.
Oh, I agree. You could just really hammer down on that one thing.
Yep. Okay, one more news story, then we'll get to our show for tonight.
Okay.
Have you ever played any of the Alice games? Xbox, PlayStation 2, 3, the American Gothic looking.
Wait. You talking
Alice?
about Alice Madness Returns for 360?
Well, any of the Alice.
Oh, dude, Madness Returns
Yeah.
is such an underrated banger.
Anyway, the third entry to that, Alice Asylum, from that American McGee Alice series, blah, 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 blah. EA just 2 days ago now, I had to check the date. We record this when we feel like it, you know.
Right.
2 days ago, EA said that they're no longer interested in creating any more titles in that Alice series.
Oh.
So despite being whatever percentage done and having a large Patreon account for it, they're cutting the funding to it now entirely. And so everybody thanked the fans, and they were holding out hope that maybe down the line, if EA lets go of the IP rights, the intellectual property to the series, that maybe they could work it out, because there's obviously parts of it done already. But as far as production and hope of receiving any more funding from EA, they're just kind of done with it now.
Right. That sucks. But first, before I say why that sucks so much, EA sucks. I mean, what are they going to do? What are they putting their money into? Another FIFA game? Who cares, man? It's the same game you've been making for 15 years. You don't do anything but update the roster and add more loot boxes. Put some money into some games that people want to play. Like the Alice series, everyone I know that has played the Alice games love them. I've never talked to someone and they say, Madness Return was okay, or that game sucked. I never, ever have heard that.
Yeah. I played it sparingly on the 360. I'm a pretty big 360 head. I liked it. I guess I wasn't really, until I wrote up these stories for the show tonight, I wasn't really aware that there was even a third one in development. But I've kind of narrowed down what I play these days. I'm playing a lot of Nintendo 64 because that's what I do. And then anytime I'm not doing that, it's Switch with my kids. And obviously it wasn't coming to Switch. So if something isn't brand new on the Nintendo systems, it's hard for me to see updates until games come out. And then I check out reviews or I hear word of mouth. Then I get into more games. But other than my friends talking about them, so I had no idea. And none of my, obviously, because this wasn't completely produced, fully funded, and spread all over the place, I never even heard about it. So I feel more for the people that were big into the series that aren't getting the third game that they want than for people like me who just are going to be missing out on a game.
I actually thought, I didn't know that a third one was in production. Just like you, I didn't know. I haven't kept up with it. But when you started talking about it, I was getting excited because I have a couple friends that love the Alice games, and I was really excited that I get to send a message when this is over. Hey, there's going to be a new Alice game. Like, I had a different mental idea when you started talking about it, because my mental idea was going to say, oh, they're almost finished production and they're going to port it to Switch. I kind of thought that's where that was going to go, but it absolutely did not. Instead, it went down the toilet.
Yeah. I don't always share these news stories with Billy because Billy's better. He's a good candid talker. I don't like
Yes,
to give him a big long list of things to talk about. I'd rather just listen to him make mistakes on live radio while I'm talking
that's
to
right.
him, and then react to his own mistakes, and then my mistakes, and then we have this living, breathing radio show full of vocal blunders and ad-libbing stuff that we probably should have prepared ahead of time. And it's just a wonderful experience for the both of us.
Right. Well, I think we do the exact perfect amount of preparation because, if we over prepare, everything's going to sound scripted. We don't want to read off of a script, and I think part of that is when we do these news stories, don't tell me them in advance. I like that because then you're right. You get my honest reaction. I don't have time to sit on the information and, really roll over it and then have a boring response to it. You get my gut reaction to these things.
Yeah, now I hope you take that visceral reaction you had from that last story and cry yourself to sleep tonight because you're not getting your third game. I'm
Well,
really sorry.
you did. My gut reaction was I'm shaking my fist like Abraham Simpson at the clouds, and EA.
Weird Billy yells at Skype. All right. That's the news for tonight. So the thing that Billy really wanted to talk about this week on his very, very elaborate and well planned out radio program for the Billtendo show was he wanted to talk about being ballers on a budget.
That's
So
right.
we're here. This is a big thing for me too. I really I'm a cheapskate. I'm sure Billy has figured this out about me years ago. I like dirty games. I like ugly games. I like restoring games. I like off-brand third-party controllers. I like the nitty-gritty. I like the stuff that's not at the front of every retro store or the front of everybody's collection. I like the $2 Nintendo 64 sumo wrestling games and the thousands of F1 and football games because I like to play them and I like to know what cheap games are great, because then if people have a budget and they come to me trying to, see what games are a great value, I have those answers. Like everybody knows, at $35-$40 that Ocarina of Time is a great game. Everybody knows that Banjo for $25 is a great game, or Mario for $40 or whatever it is now. But do you know which hockey game is, a good deal from $5 to $7? I'm here for you then. So yeah. Yeah, it's not Blades of Steel 9. It's not that one.
Classic.
So, and it's not just Nintendo 64. I like to do that with all sorts of systems. And Billy that's one of the reasons we became friends over the years, was that Billy has sales and he likes to do cheap claim sales. So I like to dig through Billy's bargain bin of games and see what he's got, what I need to fill out the portions of my collection I haven't played. And just to have somebody like-minded like that in my friend circle is very important to me. So that Billy wants to talk about this makes me, warm and fuzzy inside.
It's also, Mike, we should admit that a small, almost insignificant benefit of being one of my friends that I talk to on a regular basis is you get to see a lot of my stuff or know what it is before it ever goes up for sale,
I do.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Y'all don't understand. One of my favorite things is shopping, is buying stuff. And I get really excited because I like to try to buy cool things. And I get really happy about that because I'm going to get this cool thing to someone that really wants it. That's kind of where I get a lot of my joy in the hobby from. And so Mike will get messages from me at all hours and just look at this thing I just bought. And I'm super excited about it, like a 6-year-old.
And I do the same to him too. I'll
That's true.
Win an auction from Japan and I'm awake when he's going to sleep and hey man, look at these strategy guides. It's all baseball, but they're mine.
Yeah, it's all Japanese baseball strategy guides, but I got them.
Who else has got these? I can run my neighborhood like this, and nobody will recognize them. That's another thing that I really like. I like just having weird stuff.
Same.
So it's fun to just be slightly off of the norm.
Yeah, well, I was discussing with somebody just earlier today that no one actually has ever seen my collection because I don't show it to people. But I have to say that overall, I don't know if it would be impressive or not. I'm going to lean towards not because I gave up on just buying and adding everything to my collection years ago. I lost interest in that. And the things that I do keep are either stuff that I think is really cool or it's something obscure, it's something rare that you don't see a whole lot. Those are the type of things that I like to add to my collection. And, just because an item is obscure or rare doesn't mean it's actually worth anything. But to me, that's a cool item and I want to hold on to it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I hear you. That's the same reason I collect strategy guides. There's probably I can count on like two hands how many strategy guides are worth a significant amount of money, and almost none of them are Nintendo 64. Like everybody knows that like the Earthbound strategy guide is really expensive, and the Tron Bond for PlayStation 1, the Mega Man Legends sequel, is really expensive. Like there's all sorts of expensive, but none of them are like. So for Nintendo 64, the most expensive ones are probably like Space Station Silicon Valley and one of the Conker's variants. Like there's not a lot of just absolute must-have strategy. So it's cool to me to buy a big pile of $5 ripped up ones, salvage the best ones from my collection, and then I like to pull posters out of them and frame pages, and I make pins and buttons and magnets and stuff out. Any way I can preserve media that was like paper media that was going to go in the trash. So that's what's cool to me. And then I give them away to my friends, and then they have to look at them because they're not in my house anymore.
Yeah. I don't know. Strategy guides have always been cool to me. And even now, as an adult, even if it's a game that I don't really play, like, to be perfectly honest, I dropped the Final Fantasy series a long time ago. Lightning Returns was probably my last Final Fantasy for PS3. And but Final Fantasy guides especially, but all other guides, dude, the artwork in strategy guides, just the random artwork that gets dropped into those are amazing. So like even now, I'll thumb through any strategy guide because there's always going to be some cool piece of artwork in there.
Yeah, I hear you. So I have the Quest 6. I'm a big Quest 64 guy.
Really?
And yeah, because I just wanted. I told you I was going to drop in every episode, so here it is. There's 3 Quest 64 Prima guides, and those are the only ones that there are. So there's one with a map, there's one with a poster, and then there's a mini one that you got at Best Buy, which just had a coupon for you to buy the one with the map. So when I started collecting strategy guides, those came pretty quickly. But what I found out is that the PDF form is nowhere online. So on like archive.org, there's some strategy guide PDFs, but not a ton.
Did you say archive?
Yeah.
You said archive.
You like archive? You like that instead?
Go ahead, Mike. I'm just giving you a hard time, man.
Anyway, so if you've ever looked at any of the maps in the Quest 64 strategy guide, they're not great, but they're okay. Well, it turns out that the entire Quest 64 speedrun community, none of them, for whatever reason, had one of the physical copies of the strategy guide. So they've been running on their own, like, hand-drawn maps for 5+ years now, or whatever, however long they've been, like, really, really into it. And so when I tore that strategy guide apart, and because I don't have a fancy book scanner, I scanned it on a regular Epson printer flatbed scanner. That was the first time those maps have been on the internet. So now those are floating all over the place, and people are dissecting the maps that came along because they're not perfect. Prima put them out before the game was released.
Right. So there's going to be
better than the ones that exist.
Inconsistencies.
Yeah, but they're still, like I said, they're still better than the ones that exist. So everybody was. But it's things like that. If we don't preserve weird media, then it doesn't exist.
Yeah. I I preserve some stuff. I think strategy guides are like one of those weird niche little things, but I think it's important to preserve them. And it's not just say a strategy guide came out for Final Fantasy VII and it's got all these tips and tricks in it or whatever. It's like the what did you call that game again? Quest 64?
Yeah,
It's
sort of like that.
okay. So it's like Quest 64 where the strategy guide was finished before the game and the game might have had some changes to it. And so the maps are not 100% accurate. And so there's a difference there. And that just, I don't think that's detrimental to the situation. I think it's actually an addition to the situation because it adds a part of the actual process into the collecting. You know, you get the game, you get the manual, the strategy guide, and there's little differences in the finished products.
Yeah, I agree. It's just it's especially if you really love a game, it's just part of it. It's part of owning a complete game is having the strategy, because there's games that strategy guides came along with, like the Brazil ones have a huge box for N64 because like Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time and those games came with a Nintendo 64 box that had a full-size strategy guide inside of it. So other countries, it was part of the complete game, and we just didn't have that here because it was just extra money.
Right.
But we're here tonight, Billy, to save you money. Billy.
That's right. Well, let's get into that, Mike.
We got a little off topic talking about spending money.
That's okay.
We want to spend money wisely. All right, Billy, hit me with a cheap game for any system that you really like.
All right. So I'm going to start off strong, Mike. You have your Quest 64. I have my favorite game, and that's where I'm going first because it's super cheap, and I have hundreds and hundreds of hours into this game. It is Dark Cloud for PlayStation 2. It was made by Level 5, who is very famous now for the Professor Layton games, and Nonini Kuni, which is on Switch. Professor Layton are games for DS and 3DS, and the regular DS ones are relatively affordable. I actually have those on my list as well. I said I had DS. They're amazing puzzle games, but Dark Cloud was a Level 5 partnership with Sony where it seemed like they tried to kind of do their own Ocarina of Time type deal. It's a little bit Zelda-ish. It's an action adventure, but then it's got a world builder as well. And you could play as up to 5 different characters or allies, as they call it. But it's real time. It's not turn-based or anything like that. It's more of an action RPG where you have these small RPG elements, but you're playing all the way through. You actually swing your sword and kill werewolves and whatnot. And as a major bonus at the end of the game, every level has, like a 24 dungeon. But at the very end, after you defeat the end boss, the Dark Genie, you get another dungeon. And that dungeon has 99 levels, and it's super hard. And it's still super fun because I overgrind on that game because I enjoy it so much. So there's been several times I was wrapping up the game and I one-shot it, the Dark Genie at the end. And I'm like, well, this sucks. And then I went into the Demon Shaft, which is the name of the 99 floor dungeon. And it was still had a little bit of difficulty to it, even though I had overgrind it and I was very powerful at that point. So the game probably sells, I think it's right around $20 now, $15 to $20. Great for a budget, get hundreds of hours out of it. The normal person's probably going to put a solid 30 hours into it. But to experience everything the game has to offer, you can go much, much further than that.
Nice. So while we were talking, I looked at the price. You're actually a little high. That's for a complete copy. If you want just the disc of Dark Cloud, you can get one for $9, Billy.
What's up? You know what? Yeah. Okay. So, Mike, as a living for my job, I sell games, correct?
Correct.
I have never sold a copy of Dark Cloud. Not once. I've sold copies of Dark Cloud 2, which is in its own right an amazing game. But Dark Cloud 1, I am such a big fan of that anytime I get the opportunity to grab a copy here and there, I buy it and then I just give it to one of my friends. I've never sold a copy of that game.
What a man you are, Billy.
I know. I just want people to play it, you know? I'm like, hey, man, you're going to love this game. By the way, I haven't had like a bunch of people like message me back and they're like, hey, I really did love that game. You know, it just becomes a black hole that maybe we never talk about again.
That's fine. I've suggested Quest 64 to quite a few people, and I don't get a lot of thank you cards after that too. All right, so for my first game, I'm gonna go with an Xbox PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360 PlayStation 3 game. So my second favorite game after Quest 64 is Borderlands 2. So this is vanilla, no expansions. You can get Borderlands 2 for the PS3 right now. I'm looking at a copy on eBay, $3.28. To me, that's one of the greatest deals in the history of video games. Borderlands 2 is a first-person shooter RPG with a great dialogue, a fun story, and really, really fun characters, and the environment is amazing. But more importantly, it's got an infinite gun generator. So each piece of the gun, be the scope, the magazine, the barrel, all that stuff, and the element that goes along with it, and the brand of the gun, because there's multiple brands, are all randomly generated when enemies die. So you can play, every time you play this game, you could get a different gun and beat it all the way through. And then it's got New Game Plus and New Game Plus Plus, and then expansions to play forever. And man, I have probably put, I don't know, 800, 1,000 hours in the Borderlands 2 across, and now it's on Switch, so I can walk around with the Borderlands collection, which is only $15 for the first 3 games on the Switch too. So it continues to be a great value, and I suggest Borderlands 2 to everybody.
Is it insulting that I've never played Borderlands?
No, I don't expect you to play every game. You should play Borderlands 2 though. You definitely should.
What's the format? Is it a first-person shooter?
It is. It is a first-person shooter RPG. So you have like
I'm not gonna
skills. These skills that you level up, but all the skills pretty much are built around it still being a first-person game. So
I'll try it, but I don't really play FPS games.
I think you'll like this one.
I tried to like Skyrim. I tried and tried.
It's still a shooter game though, Billy. It's not like wands and stuff. Everybody uses a gun. You can only use guns. It's a gun game.
Okay.
You'll like it. Pop-pow. All right, hit me with another game. Pop-pow.
All right. So, I mentioned this last week. I'm gonna have to mention it again. It is. I don't know, Mike, you can look it up, work your magic, $15-20, DuckTales for NES. And while I'm mentioning that, let's also mention the amazing, absolutely astounding remaster of DuckTales that came out on PlayStation 3 and Wii U. Again, it maybe hits $40 for the remasters. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head. But DuckTales is just one of those super relaxing, peaceful games. You bounce around as Scrooge McDuck on his pogo stick. You save Huey, Dewey, and Louie. You fly from place to place with Launchpad. It's great. Also, that 8-bit version of the DuckTales theme song, I can hear it, man. I can hear the music to the moon level in my head at any time. I love DuckTales.
It's about $20, so it's a good value, Billy, especially for an NES game that actually plays well, which is, if you played a lot of NES games, you know that of the 900 whatever, there's about half of them that are not worth touching.
Yeah.
Which I guess is a complaint about a lot of systems, but it's really bad on the NES because 8-bit games are a lot harder for my children and even the generation before that to swallow. Pretty much anybody born after 2000, it's really hard for them to go back if the game's not enjoyable. Like we put up with a lot of crappy games when we were kids.
Oh, we definitely did. My stepson is just about to turn 18. When I first met him, he was about 10 years old, and I introduced him to DuckTales, and he played it a few times off and on, and he enjoyed it. Even though he was into the modern gaming, it's just one of those great 8-bit games that are fun to play. It's not bogged down with, there's no heavy learning curve to DuckTales. You could just pick it up and play it, having never seen it before. And it's still a fun game.
And that's important. That's another part of this list is games. Hopefully these budget games are games that you could still pick up and play now and not just have Billy DuckTales nostalgia feelings about, but have current, I'm having fun today in my garage with my buddies fun.
Right.
So that's awesome. And that's where I'm going to go next on my list. For $9.71, about $10 pretty regularly, WCW NWO Revenge on the N64.
Oh, go ahead. That's my favorite wrestling game. Let's hear it, Mike.
It's a good one. It's not my favorite wrestling game, but it is a really, really good wrestling game. And it's right in the heyday because it's the last really great WCW game that came out before the THQ Aki games went to WWF at the time then instead and made WrestleMania 2000. So it was the last really, really good WCW game. The roster was amazing. The entrances, the music, the pay-per-views. It was all awesome 4-player action. The only criticism that I constantly have about that game is that anybody who's played it knows that you could rotate the stick to kick out of every submission and pin. Except that it gets progressively harder so if somebody's got you in a submission, like a head submission, and they've been working your brain the whole game by hitting you with baseball bats or, pile drivers or whatever, you run the risk late in the game of spinning the stick and immediately tapping out to a submission then too. So it adds a layer, but also it's a little bit subtractive because if you played with friends, pins didn't work. You couldn't pin people. So you had to do it other ways.
So who was your go-to guy?
On WCW, I always liked the Japanese guys, like the guy with the blue pants, long blue or yellow pants that did all of the like brainbuster suplexes and kicks to the head and stuff like that. As far as regular WCW wrestlers, I was a big Sting guy because I was a big Bret Hart fan growing up. Yeah. So I liked, that they use the same finisher, and I don't know. It was like a hearkening to my sunglasses Bret Hart, the Hart Foundation days. He's my favorite WCW wrestler, I guess. My favorite wrestler outside of Bret Hart is Scott Hall, and he's in that game, but I don't love NWO Scott Hall. Like I like Razor Ramon Scott Hall more, but he's still great in that game.
Yeah. I don't think he was well represented in that game as far as he seemed like he was a little bit on the downward difficulty curve where he should have been much higher. Like the Scott Hall character should have been more of a Kevin Nash, Hogan type level of difficulty and skill, and I didn't feel like that was well represented in the game. My best all-around guy for the game was always Scott Steiner because he had submission holds, he had good finishers. It was the whole deal. Yeah, I thought he was great in that game.
So a thing about Scott Steiner that I didn't know is I did not know that he still claims that he's the one that came up. I know he calls it the Frankensteiner, and a lot of us called it that growing up too. But I don't know that he still claims to this day that he's the first person to ever do that move, which is a jump up and, scissor somebody with your legs and then roll backwards into a pin or into which, I'm sure there's like 18 million Hispanic and Japanese wrestlers who say they've been doing that since the dawn of man. But Scott Steiner still claims to this day that that move is called the Frankensteiner and not a Hurricane Rana or whatever else you want to call it, and that he came up with it.
That's why everyone calls it a Frankensteiner and no one calls it a Hurricane Rana, because that's what it is, dude. That thing's probably been around in freaking Latin America for 16 generations being handed down from father to son.
Yeah, people doing it to bulls.
You're at your kid's first birthday party and they're like, it's time for you to learn.
Yes, Chiquita Sarah. No, jump off of this table and wrap your legs around your brother's shoulders.
And I'm over here yelling, this is the best quinceañera ever. No, in all seriousness, that is definitely, man, that is definitely, I would say the Japanese probably have a long history with it as well. And I can't remember what they call it offhand. But, no, I love Scott Steiner, but he definitely didn't create that move. No way.
But it's fine. We just let him have it. His Scott Steiner math at this point and all of his brain problems. Just let him have the things that he does.
Okay, not only the math. We're just gonna glaze over Scott Steiner math. But I remember about 2 or 3 years ago, something happened. Like he owns a Denny's or something in Michigan, and somebody like robbed it or robbed the place next door or whatever. Something happened, and I don't remember the exact situation, but he was interviewed live on the news, and on the bar, the little infographic underneath him, it said restaurant owner Scott Steiner. And like, I'm like, man, what a way to be known. Restaurant owner Scott Steiner. You know, like, he was probably upset they did not put Big Papa Pump on that bar.
That's fine. That's he's got to be okay with that. I know he wasn't, but he's got to be okay with it. All right, Billy, what's your next game?
Oh, man. So I got like 2 ways I could go on this, and they're both good platformers. I'm going to go in the way of the better platformer. Again, it's a major classic. I think we're looking at $20 on PS1, and it's available for PS4, Xbox One, remastered, and I think it's still around $20 or so. It's the original Spyro trilogy. Now, just Spyro 1, the Spyro trilogy will cost you about $20 a game on PlayStation 1, but you can buy Spyro Reignited for PlayStation 4, and the updated graphics are beautiful. The music was done by Stuart Copeland, who is a member of the Police. A lot of people don't know that. He dropped out after the 3rd game after the original trilogy. Sony really wanted to demonstrate that they could make a family-friendly platformer game, and that's what Spyro was all about. He should have been their mascot. Crash Bandicoot's a terrible game. It's okay at best. It's freaking mid. But Spyro should have been the mascot. It is by far the best platformer on PlayStation 1.
I like it. I like Spyro.
I love Spyro, man.
All right. Where am I going to go? You got such good choices, Billy. I don't know where I'm going to go with my next game. I think I'm going to say PlayStation 1 with you. $3.64 for Cool Borders 4. I'm a big snowboarding game fan, and while I really like Cool Borders 3, I wanted to put that on here, but 4 is cheaper. I'm a big fan of 1080. I'm a big fan of SSX Tricky in those games, but Cool Borders 4 is just so cheap, and to get into that arcade, press a direction, crank up a huge trick, and bust out like a 2,000 degree spin, right, and off of a huge ramp, and then have races and stuff. Cool Borders 4 for PlayStation 1 at $3.64 is just too good of a value for people to pass up.
Yeah, it's Cool Borders, great series. It's definitely a good alternative, budget alternative to Tricky, which is not too expensive. But it's hard to get a Tricky, man. Every time I get one, it's sold within 5 minutes.
Oh, it's a great game. That's why.
It really is. As far as snowboarding games go, it's a great one. Cool Borders is great on a budget. if you like good snowboard games, I always enjoyed it. I thought it was good.
One of those like sub-genres or micro-genres snowboarding games, especially arcade snowboarding, because there's been some, there's Big Mountain 2000 on the N64, which has tried to be more of a simulation. That's not a great game.
No,
but as far as like arcade snowboarding games, like it's really hard to find a bad one.
That's true. Do you think between the period of Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 2, so in that time period, Nintendo 64, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, GameCube, do you think that's when almost every single snowboarding game was made, from like Snowboard Kids by Atlas to SSX Tricky? And what was that one? I know there's one for PS2 and it's just called Snowboarding.
Oh yeah. Like, well, that was a PlayStation staple, was to pack out your roster with games with a, pool or
Bowling.
tennis, bowling. Yeah.
Yeah. And they weren't terrible games. They were playable. They were finished games.
Yeah.
But
that generation was really big. That was when the X Games was huge. And so every one of those sports, Dave Mirra BMX and Kelly Slater surfing, everything that was considered
Razor.
like an extreme, Razor freestyle scooter. All those games had like a Tony Hawk clone of some sort, where it was points and tricks and racing and doing stuff. And when that kind of died down, skateboarding stuck around for quite a while. Not just Tony Hawk, but skateboarding in general, because like the Skate series is good.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of persevered. But after that early 2000s, like 2010, all those other sports just kind of died off as far as like video game representation. So we lived in the like heyday of snowboarding games.
Right.
And now it's really hard to find a brand new one that's super good.
Yeah, I actually can't think of any new snowboarding games in like the last 5 years.
No, I could Google it, but I'm probably not going to.
Man, now that you mention it, you're right. Everybody had like their Tony Hawk of bicycles, or that rollerblading games. They had Razor, which was Razor's a terrible game. I don't care what anybody says. I did not enjoy that at all. What is your thought on BMX Triple X?
I don't know, stupid. Like it was just one of those gimmick games, like the Guy game, where it's like if we like tease that we're gonna have video game boobs in it, that people are gonna buy it. Leisure Suit Larry, like everybody bought Leisure Suit Larry hoping they were gonna catch like one video game under boob along the way.
Dude, the Guy game did have boobs in it, didn't it?
What? Yeah, it did. And that's what got it shit canned, because one of the girls was under 18, and that's why you can't buy it on eBay anymore.
I had this conversation with somebody the other day, is that they had actual boobs in it, and it turned out one of the girls was 17.
But they thought she lied.
Oh, she lied. That's true.
Yeah.
In their defense, she lied.
Which it doesn't. Anybody can lie about anything, and that doesn't. The game was a terrible premise to start. So to have video game boobs and then find out that was just the icing on the terrible video game cake. So
right. Dude, why? Okay, if we can have the Guy game, why is there no bachelor party stripper game?
Well, isn't there's got to be some like man ass on one of the Leisure Suit Larry games. I'm pretty certain there is. Plus, they got like the Twilight. Didn't like Shades of Grey make games and stuff too? There's got to be guy butts on games.
I don't know anything about that. You know what? And nowadays with indie games and stuff like that being way more prevalent than they ever have been, I guarantee there's stuff out there. It's almost like, what is it on the internet? Rule 43?
Oh, yeah. 34, where everything's got a porn of it. Yeah.
Right. So if there's a Rule 34, I'm proposing that eventually there is going to be a similar rule for video games. If you can think of it, there is a game in that category.
Yeah, I agree. All right, another game. We got You got to have a big list here, Billy. Give me another one.
Okay, so this is going to be a modern game. All right, and I myself played it on Switch. Um, my daughter also played it on Switch. My son played it on Xbox One. So, um, I am a really big fan of it. And the game is Bendy and the Ink Machine. I think I mentioned it last week in a different context. It's kind of a dark satire of Disney, like not current Disney, but early Disney, where everything was kind of in black and white. You have your goofy character, your Mickey Mouse type character, and you're in the haunted warehouse and animation studio. It is FPS, and most of it is point and click, but then at the same time, they throw in some, okay, you have this pipe wrench and you have to hit stuff with it, which gets a little frustrating because you're not expecting to do that because that's not the way the game was going up until that point. But overall, great game. Probably running $20 to $30. It's not expensive. It's a great experience. Very, very creepy. If you're into creepy games like I am, I'm a big lover of Silent Hill and Clock Tower, and Fatal Frame. But if you're into those type games where you like the creepy atmosphere, Bendy and the Ink Machine is an absolute banger.
Love it. I'm going to come back at you with another creepy lore game, and it's the cheapest one, I think, of the series, Castlevania, but the Lords of Shadow on Xbox 360. It's about a $9 game to play Xbox. Castlevania. Big fan of Castlevania. I really like this one is not your traditional side-scrolling Castle Metroidvania game. It's more like a God of War style weapons upgrade, destroy a bunch of enemies in a 3D area with huge bosses. It's a really great game. It does, some people give it some flack for the, because it's got like quasi platforming elements, and it's got parts that the difficulty has jumped around from some really easy level enemies to a really difficult boss at the end, or the opposite, swarmed enemies and then easy bosses. But it's still, to me, really great game, and being about a $9 game, that's an awesome value.
Oh yeah, man. All right, so any game, to me personally, even sports games, any game is worth $5. Any game that is fun to play and costs under $10, that goes on my list of bangers, without a doubt. Like, you get to play a Castlevania game for less than $10 in 2023. That's an amazing feat in itself. Just do it.
Yeah.
So while we're gonna jump on that $10 game, I also have a $10 game up next, and it's a little out of the box. GameCube game, licensed property. It was Disney, Pixar, something like that. I had an amazing time playing it. I loved it. It's a platformer. The game Robots. Maybe it was DreamWorks.
Yeah, that's not where I thought you were going. I thought you were going to hit me with like Grab by the Ghoulies or something like that.
Oh, man, I love Grab by the Ghoulies. That's not a licensed property. That's a rare game.
No, you're right.
That's an underrated gem right there. But that was their first game with Microsoft.
Yeah.
So Robots, I originally put it in to test a system. It was the closest game to me. And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to play 5 minutes of this game to test this system out and make sure everything's working fine. Controller port, laser, everything. Make sure it saves to the memory card before I put it up for sale. And I ended up not taking it out until I beat the game because I just enjoyed it. I had to go back and forth to it quite a few times over the course of probably a week, 15 minutes here and there. But overall, it was a very fun game. The game's only $10 or less, I believe. I believe it was also on PlayStation 2, but I played it on GameCube and I enjoyed it.
Nice. All right. Sub $10 game. I got to find another one here. Oh, so back to N64, which is my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Jet Force Gemini is $9.90. Jet Force Gemini, now we're talking about Rare, another Rare game that people don't give a ton of credit for, but it's not like people like to say underrated, and I don't like hearing that because at this point everybody's played and heard about every Nintendo 64 game, so it's not really underrated because it was a good game and everybody likes it, but it's cheap, and you get a lot of hours, like 40, 50, 60 hours out of Jet Force Gemini, because if you actually want to beat the game, you have to go back and find every one of the little tribal dudes floating in the levels, and that's the only way you get to the end and fight Mizar and actually beat the game 100%. And that takes you a ton of time, probably making it one of the most difficult Nintendo 64 games in the library to complete 100%, or even to just complete the game if you want to, if beating the final boss is complete to you.
Yeah. It depends on how you look at complete.
Yeah, because you can finish the game.
I like Jet Force Gemini. I would use the word cautiously, but I would say underrated. I don't think it gets enough credit. Everyone's heard of it, but I don't think it's as popular as it should be. It should be up there on its little pedestal along with the rest of the Rare titles for Nintendo 64 because they did an amazing job on all their titles for that system. Also, for people that don't know, it's not called Jet Force Gemini in Japan. It's called Star Twins.
Which, is what it is.
Yeah, well, that would be the translation, right? Gemini is twins?
Yes, correct. It just, I feel like that's, of all the things for Japanese N64, like the amazing artwork from Japan and so like Turok is called Violence Killer and, and we get Blast Dozer instead of Blast Core. Like there's so many, and then you get Star Twins and I'm kind of like, oh,
they could have done better. Why couldn't it have been like Star Killers, So, yeah, that my favorite rebranding is actually Turok. Every time I see a Japanese Turok, I buy it just because it's named Violence Killer. Like it sounds like such a brutal game. And then you put it in, you're like, oh, that's Turok.
Love it. You got more games, Billy? We got out the box radios has got us for another like 15 minutes of talking, then they tell us to get out of here because they've got music to play and stuff.
Yeah, they've got music to play and they've got other shows to broadcast. We can't do everything, Mike. Other people need to talk too. So let me throw this out there, and this game is no secret. It's an absolute classic. It's a Nintendo 64. A lot of people say that the pinnacle of what Rare did on the Nintendo 64 was Conker's Bad Fur Day. And in my personal opinion, that game is a beautiful masterpiece of cutscenes and animation with very little just mid-platforming in it. If you want the absolute best Rare game on Nintendo 64 at $30, you are not going to beat Banjo-Kazooie. Banjo-Tooie was fine. It's not bad. But Banjo-Kazooie is better. It is better in every aspect.
I agree.
One of my least favorite comparisons. Now, I did enjoy some of the things where there was secret entrances from one world to another in Tooie. But also I felt like in Banjo-Tooie, there was something missing when you would go behind a hut and there'd be a musical note there that's just a different color, or maybe it's a treble clef or something, and it'd be worth 20 notes. Whereas in Banjo-Kazooie, there were 20 individual notes you had to find, and to me, that's better. Who cares if this one's worth 10? Let them all be worth 1 and put the work in, man.
I don't think that your opinion on the banjo games is too off base, because I think, as far as the community believes, you're in the right on that one. And it's not that anybody hates Banjo-Tooie, but they made the levels bigger and not necessarily better, and they tried to add a lot of stuff, and they didn't necessarily make the game itself better, just more.
I would agree with that. It was made to be more, but not necessarily better, because in some aspects these giant levels felt a little empty, like there was not much going on. Where in Banjo-Kazooie, the levels might have been smaller and more compact, but that meant all of the action was in that smaller area. So there was plenty of stuff to do there.
All right. Game with plenty of stuff to do. I'm going to pull another one off my list. I'm going to go to the DS. Clubhouse games for the DS. $4.69 for just the cartridge of Clubhouse games.
Now
that's a game that I have dumped tons of hours into, and I've even bought the Switch version for the same reason, because I dumped more hours into that. But playing multiplayer with your friends, super fun. It had a really mediocre bowling and stuff like that, darts, but more importantly, it had a ton of card games, mahjong, and stuff that you could play multiplayer locally, which was just amazing. And if you were playing single player, which I did a lot, you had to beat every single game in order. So they had a 1 through 30, whatever order of the games. And then once you beat it, to unlock a bunch of stuff from multiplayer, you had to beat it a second time against the harder difficulty, and then you had to beat every game in order the third time against the hardest difficulty, which was nearly impossible, but really fun to do, just because, you were already going to dump all those hours in anyway. So for $5 to sit around for hours and hours and hours and try to get better at games like Mahjong, where if you don't know how to play it, you have to learn like right then, was a great challenge for me, and I love that game.
Yeah, no, you know what? There are, I haven't played Clubhouse games specifically, but in that giant Ziploc bag, I did see it in there, so I know I have it. I might give it a try, but there are plenty of games like that, maybe not as good as that one, or maybe better, I don't know, but multi-game games where there's just like a lot of different options, and especially from early to mid DS, it was really big on local multiplayer. When I played with my kids, we would all be sitting on different couches and chairs in the living room with our own consoles playing together, which was awesome. At that time, that was kind of unheard of. We could have done it on the Game Boy Advance, but we all would have had to have been cabled together and stuff.
Yeah, and to have that many options on a single game. So like I said, there's card games, but then it had like Chinese checkers and shogi and backgammon, and then you had like dominoes and then games like solitaire and stuff for the single players. But to have things like backgammon and koi koi and old maid and all that, and memory, even simple, and then pool. Like, so I'm a born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s kid, so I played a lot of Yahoo games, because that's how you chatted with your friends when I was a teenager, is you went into the Yahoo games and you played, Yahoo whatever, cribbage or pool or whatever. And it wasn't just to play the game and to be great at it. It was that you could sit in that chat room and your parents didn't like sit and log your chats because they thought you were just playing video games with your friends, And so I played a ton of Yahoo pool, and that was the kind of feeling that like Clubhouse games brought back for me, because you can chat during that too.
No, that's cool, man. I remember on the Yahoo chat days, I used to play a lot of chess. I would just find random people to play chess with all the time. Actually, I have a pretty cool story about that, but I don't think we have enough time for it tonight. So
save it for our all board games episode in the future.
Yeah. Oh, That's right, Settlers of Catan, baby.
That's another probably at this point probably a really good value because I think it's still on the Xbox marketplace somewhere. So.
And then when we're done with that, we can play the Cones of Dunshire.
I'm a big Parks and Rec fan, so yes, we can. All right, you got one more for me, Billy, to close this out?
Yeah, actually, now this is really going to push the limits of what's called what is a budget game. It really is, because it is hitting $50. The last one I sold loose copy, and that's what I sold it for. It was $50, and I'm pretty sure it's still around that price. It may have gone up a little bit, but it is the cheapest way to play the game, and that's Chrono Trigger. And I mean, how much do you actually need to talk about Chrono Trigger to know what it is? It's a fantastic RPG made by Square Enix, and it's got time travel in it. So let's do it.
I've never played that, Billy.
I know. Let's call back to last week when you said you've never played it. You look like a guy that's never played Chrono Trigger.
I look like a guy that grew up in Sega Genesis heaven, so I didn't have to play any of the Super Nintendo, any of the RPGs whatsoever. So I'm catching up.
Did you play the best RPG on Genesis?
Phantasy Star 3?
No. Crusader of Senti.
Oh, see, I think that game's just okay.
Really?
Yeah, I thought it was fine. I really liked the time travel and the stuff of the Phantasy Star series. That was what did it for me. And especially since you're pushing Chrono Trigger, you think that you'd be down with that too.
Well, yeah, to an extent. Crusader of Senti was like Genesis, their wannabe Zelda. And I guess it was kind of obscure because it's super expensive now. It's crazy.
Yeah, I say it's not a budget game at all, Billy. We should.
No, it's not. But when I started emulating, that was actually one of the first games I played. That Little Samson for NES, which is actually an amazing game. It's really fun to play. Is it worth paying the price for to play it? Absolutely not. I don't think any game is worth that price to just be able to play it. But Crusader of Senti I thought was a very fun game. I was happy with that. But no, I would never buy that.
All right, we got a little time left. How many games you got left on your list, Billy? You got a lot of games? I've got quite a few games left on my list.
No.
I'll rapid fire a couple off and you stop me if there's something you want to talk about. We got a couple of minutes here. All right. Mass Effect 3 on the Xbox 360, $3.
Never played it.
South Park Stick of Truth on the 360, $2.50.
My kids have played that a million times. They love it.
I played that too. It's actually a really fun RPG. So
I haven't played that or Whole But Fractured. Is that what it is?
Yeah, Fractured Butthole.
Yeah, Fractured Butthole. They've been playing that one off and on for a couple years now. They love that game. They think it's great. They still play Stick of Truth off and on. Not like our first South Park game on 64, which was terrible.
Miss Pac-Man for the Genesis, $4.70.
Get out of here. Miss Pac-Man is the best version of Pac-Man. I love it.
It is the best one. I've also got College Slam NES or SNES, sorry. That's like the NBA Jam, but the college basketball one. That's $6. I feel like that's a great value compared to how much NBA Jam's hiked up a little bit over the years. So.
Yeah.
As long as you don't care about players, but you're missing like Michael Jordan and all the good players anyway, so you use. So whatever.
Yeah. Whatever.
I've got the cheapest Pokemon game. Do you know what the cheapest Pokemon game you can get loose on a cartridge is, Billy?
Let me think for just a second. I'm going to say, for DS, it's Pokemon Sun, or is it Moon?
It is. Pokemon Sun and Moon are both
$20
games. Moon is the cheaper one. It's $18, just about, give or take. Sun is a little more expensive, about $20. But still, So I took about a 10-year hiatus from Pokemon between Platinum and those. I don't know what the actual timeline is, but I didn't play any of the Black and White ones or X and Y. I didn't come back until Moon, and I really enjoyed Moon, even though it wasn't the best Pokemon game. It was a nice, like, jump back into Pokemon. So sub $20 to play a whole ass Pokemon game, awesome.
Right. Yeah, because do you really want to pay $120 to play Heart Gold?
Yeah, you don't.
Right.
Though the Pokewalker was cool. And a couple other games I've got. Mission Impossible for N64 is $4.50.
Good game.
Forsaken for N64, the flight first person, however you want it, $7.50.
Good game.
And then I've got a couple weird ones. I had Ground Zero Texas for the Sega CD. If you've never played an entirely full motion video click game, that was a $9 game. I remember we rented a Sega CD from Captain's Video in my city. And so you had to come home with the big briefcase. And that was the game. I rented that and Sonic. And Ground Zero Texas absolutely terrified me as a young teen. If you're not used to jump scares of people in like masks and suits in a video game, Ground Zero Texas is not for you. Because you were not like, I wasn't used to seeing real people in video games and having them dressed up like aliens and jump out like the aliens behind the bush in that M. Night Shyamalan Signs movie. Scared the crap out of me. So I'll always remember that game.
Yeah, that actually just made me think of something else, but I've never actually played that game. I've never heard of that game. But now, while you were talking, I'm like writing this down because I'm like, I'm going to play this game. That sounds terrible.
Yeah, it wasn't. So most of these games we talked about are really good games. Ground Zero Texas isn't the best game, but I remember it vividly, and it's a really good reminder of like pushing the boundaries in video games from the early 2000s, and the late 90s and stuff, like games that were like really getting there, even though they weren't good. Like we've had a lot of those markers along the years, and that's just one of them.
By the way you were just describing that game, I'm like in my mind, I'm like, this is a full motion game with people jumping out with masks on and stuff, and somehow I feel like it was filmed like Night Trap. And I'm like,
that's exactly it. It's exactly
Yeah, that sounds terrible, and I definitely want to play it.
You should.
Yeah. I like a good weird game now and then. Great game for the Switch when you can find it. It was made by Super Rare over in the UK. It's called The Last Day of June, and basically, it's little Tim Burton-esque art style puppet people. A man and his wife are spending the day on the lake, and then they go home, and they get into a car accident, and the wife dies, and her name is June. And basically you're the man, and you're going through your memories, and you get to travel back to the day before she dies to put all these memories and puzzle pieces together to stop her from dying. And it's a weird little game, and it's very morose all the way through. So I enjoyed it. I think I paid $40 for it brand new from Super Rare. And I just like weird games sometimes.
And that's why we like you, Billy, because you're weird.
You're
part of this show, this weird show. And now we're out of time on our weird show for tonight.
Oh.
So that's okay. So if you're a big fan of Billy, check out all of his various Bill stuff. He's got his Billtendo website and Billtendo fan page, and there's Billtendo bobbleheads in the Billtendo universe. Look him up online. I'm sure you're going to find him somewhere. Billy, you got anything else for us?
No, man. Y'all should check out Mike. Mike loves Quest 64. If you find him online, he's around, generally undercover hiding. Send him some Quest 64 memes. He'll love it.
I will love it. All right, everybody. And we love you.
Yeah.
You have a wonderful night. Billy, have a good night.
You have a good night, Mike. Holla at your boy.